PodcastCoug Season 3, Episode 12.
You're listening to the PodcastCoug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The PodcastCoug is your weekly Coug On Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. And now, here is your host, PodcastCoug.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the PodcastCoug. I am James Laurie, the PodcastCoug, and you are listening to the PodcastCoug. We're all things Cougar football. We are all things Cougar football. 30 minutes of Coug talk. We're talking about recruiting. We're talking about our upcoming 2019 schedule for next year, and which is just a week away. And Iowa State, the Cyclones, in our upcoming Alamo Bowl in San Antonio. And so here we go. Welcome, and hope you've had a great Christmas and holiday season. Here we are in the new year, almost. Happy New Year. But before, we got a big bowl game coming up, which is just tomorrow if you're listening on Thursday. Hey, Leach, about our recruiting class real quick. We are talking about our new recruits, and Leach is just really, really proud. He's really happy. 19 new players, including a couple of gray shirts, and Leach is just really happy with the results. Good class, and it was really good. I think better than last year. He's got, he was talking about no respect or honor for the rankings of the recruiting services that are out there. He doesn't care that all 17 players who have signed to be a Cougar early, right, on the early signing day, basically are all 3-star recruits. He doesn't care, right? Certainly doesn't, it's like number 53 in the nation and 9th in the Pac-12. And that's because the incoming class, really has great marks, according to Leach. Now, he's real proud, and this early signing period, really good start here. And the coaches and everybody put a lot of great work into it. And as far as, from last year, this one is better, according to Mike, right? It's the third straight year that Washington State has been ranked 9th in the Pac-12, despite literally classes consistently ranked in the lower half of the conference. But if you think about it, the Cougs are 26-10, right, in the conference in the last 4 seasons. Again, 26-10, and 3 years in a row, we're ranked the 9th recruiting class out of the Pac-12. So, it's interesting on that, you're right. So we're tied with the UW for the best record, and the stars are artificial. It literally, in his entire career, he's never, called in a guy and said, hey, run this, what's your advice on this? I'm third down here. What's your advice? He doesn't certainly go to these guys and ask him for advice. So, if they were, they'd be invited to all the staff meetings and whatnot. So it's just, it's very interesting, right? So the stars really don't mean a lot when it comes to picking the right talent, the right players, and look at his, he knows how to hire the right guys for staff, right? So, the priorities were the secondary, the defensive line, and the offensive line were the top priorities for the Cougs, because we're losing some of our top cornerbacks to graduation, and the Cougs are, we recruited 3 junior college defensive backs, and they're all expected to enroll in January, and so to compete for some playing time. So we've got some success with junior college DBs, and the Cougs signed one quarterback, Gunner Cruz, and I just can't get over that name, right? Gunner. I mean, come on, right? We've talked about Gunner a little bit, read about Gunner Cruz, Queen Creek, Arizona. And he's going to enroll next month. And so he's one of 7 recruits who will enroll early in the classes in January and participate in spring ball and spring practices. So Gunner could be part of the competition and replace Gardner, whose last game is Friday. And Leach said that Gunner is a big quarterback, big arm, great feet. And he's not sure whether he's going to be ready to compete for the starting job. He's got a lot of things to do, but the key for the spring with Gunner is to adjust quickly. So here again, with Cam and Cooper and all the other guys, I mean, it's going to be really, really competitive on the quarterback. So pretty interesting. Again, last week was the early signing period. For the traditional signing is in February. So good going Cougs, and the staff are bringing in a boatload of talent. Real excited. This is by far the best, earliest recruiting class in the Mike Leach era. So 2019 football, our schedule next year, we're opening at home against New Mexico State, and that's the last day of August. Okay. Then we got a couple of home games in a row, and then it's Northern Colorado, and then we're at Houston, the other Houston Cougars, which I'm thinking, and I haven't checked if we have ever played Houston before. We've had the BYU several times, but have we ever played the Houston Cougars? That will be very interesting. And that's going to be at a neutral site, not at the University of Houston. It's going to be in Texas, but it's not going to be on their campus. We got UCLA at home on September 21st. We're at Utah, and we got a couple of buys this coming next year, right? We've got a bye early in October. Then we're down at Tempe with Arizona State. We've got the Buffaloes at home. We're down in Eugene. We've got another bye before we're at Berkeley. And then we've got Stanford at home, Oregon State at home, and another Black Friday at the Apple Cup at Montlake. So that is the season for 2019. I like the couple of buys. I think it's great, and it should be interesting. We got Apple Cup, man. How many years can we go, right? I mean, literally, we've got the next one. There's no question about it. We just can't simply. And then Browning's gone, and Myles Gaskin's gone. So we've got those guys. It's going to be on November 29th, Black Friday again, at Seattle at Montlake. So, hey, we're going to be right back. We're going to talk about the Cyclones, the Iowa State Cyclones of Ames in the 2018 Valero Alamo Bowl next, right here on the Podcast Coug.
Hey, Coug fans. You're podcasting with James Laurie and the Podcast Coug Radio Network. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show, featuring all things Cougar football in Washington State. To help you get through the week, hit the subscribe button or check us out on iTunes, the App Store, iOS, Google Play, Stitcher, or at PodcastCoug.com.
We run on action, on power, on heavy hits. From kickoff to the final whistle, we thrive on the tension, the anticipation, the intensity that electrifies every second of the game. The Valero Alamo Bowl. We run on football.
Washington State University, an institute of...
Wait, let me show you WSU. We're about being hands-on and getting our hands dirty. We bring art to science and science to wine. We build Mars rovers and launch new medical schools, with the occasional pizza break. Now back to work, because we're always moving forward and leaving our mark on the world. Now that's my WSU.
welcome back to the second half of the Podcast Coug. I'm James Laurie, the Podcast Coug, and Happy New Year. Yeah, right. Happy New Year, everybody. Coug fans and Wazoo Watch and all the diehard Cougs on Facebook and everybody in the network. Happy New Year. And here's to a great 2019. And speaking about greatness, 11 games. Cougs have a chance to win 11 games for the first time in school history, right? Here we are, Friday's game, Alamo Bowl, Iowa State. We have our chance to win 11 games this year, and that's the first ever. It'd be great, right? Number 12, Washington State, 10-2. Iowa State is at number 25. They're 8-4. Of course, Friday, 6 p.m., it's Alamo Dome, 65,000 seats inside the Dome Stadium, San Antonio. Gosh, great river walk. There's so much going on down there. Greatness. I mean, we got Six Flags Fiesta over Texas, the river walk, the Alamo Bowl. I mean, it's a great place to go. And there's been apparently some flights canceled out of SeaTac. There's some electrical storms. We're going to talk about that briefly in a minute. But should be fun. Of course, Washington State, the line is by 3. We are favored, and it's the first meeting between the two schools. We've never played the Cyclones before. We got the only thing in common is Coach Walden. And the Cyclones started out, by the way, 1-3 this season, with losses coming at Iowa, Oklahoma, Texas, and TCU. But, Iowa State won 6 of its last 7 games, knocking off Oklahoma State, West Virginia, and Texas Tech along the way to finish 6-3 in the Big 12. And again, the teams they lost to: Iowa, Oklahoma, TCU, and Texas. So 8-4. And Cyclones are playing in their in a bowl for the second straight season. They haven't had a lot of success over the past several decades, but they are just stoked up. Second bowl game of the year. Iowa State outgained 5 of its last 8 opponents and outrushed 6 of its last 10. And they're also 6-1 since freshman quarterback Brock Purdy has been starter at quarterback. That's right. He's a freshman, and it's Brock Purdy. Very interesting. Now, last year, the Cyclones went into the first bowl game under Coach Mike Campbell as a 3-point underdog against Memphis, and they were upset. They upset the Tigers at their home turf, Liberty Bowl, 21-20. That was a squeaker. Now, Washington State, obviously, we've got the big advantage on offense. We got a solid defense, but Iowa State struggled to beat FCS opponent Drake in its final game. So, this should be a great game, and I hope we're going to be jumped and show up and just ready for it, jacked up. Unlike the Apple Cup for the past 7 years, right? So, of course, it's Minshew, Patman, Williams, Borghi, Pallure, and goes on and on and on. And I just hope we're going to be ready. They got their watches. They've got a bunch of nice gifts. Seeing some of the photos, some really, really cool gifts. They get wined and dined pretty big time. And then the Alamo, the historical Alamo, to see all that. It's been a great place to go to this week. Weather's great. Key players for the Cyclones. Again, Brock Purdy at QB and a freshman. They've got a great running back, David Montgomery. Guy is going to be very tough to control. We got to contain David Montgomery. And then wide receiver Hakeem Butler. And, about the Apple Cup, let's not forget, the Cougs have not looked good in bowl games, just like the AC the past 2 seasons, against Minnesota, against Michigan State, and who knows, the loss with that Apple Cup lingering, who knows what's going to happen. Sure, losing again to the Huskies this year was just brutal, right? Just absolutely brutal. But here's our chance to win 11 games for the first time in school history, and we could just end it up in style, right? Especially with Gardner Minshew ending his collegiate career. But we got to stop the run. David Montgomery, he's rushed 294 yards 5 touchdowns in two of the past games with the Cyclones, and we want to give him. We just want to contain him. They're going to give him a lot of carries. So the key for Washington State is containing Montgomery and making Brock Purdy struggle, just really, really struggle and fall. Right. So if the Cyclones can run the ball, and I think they will, it's going to make it a lot easier for Purdy. Who's got the 7-1 record since taking over at QB. So he's, Brock Purdy is on a roll. He's 7-1 since taking over the helm as quarterback. So, pretty good record. I mean, that's pretty outstanding. So they ended up their regular season banged up, quite honestly. But however, Iowa State's injury situation today, they are looking pretty good. They've had a couple of weeks to heal and rest up. Coach Matt Campbell says they're healthy as ever. They're healthy as they've ever been. And the time off from their game against FCS Drake, which they, again, struggled against Drake. They did beat them. But all that time off has really helped them. They're basically 100% going into the Alamo Bowl. So we got to get Gardner going, right? Minshew struggled in the Snow Bowl, in the snow at the Apple Cup. And that's rare for him during that, our phenomenal season this year. The Cougs need to rebound and have a performance like the ones that made literally Minshew Mustache an icon in Pullman since September. So the history for the Alamo Bowl, Washington State is making a record of 4th consecutive bowl appearance and number 15th overall appearances. Cougs' second trip to the Alamo Bowl after, remember that defeating Baylor 10-3 in 1994, and our third trip to San Antonio. We played actually a non-con against Notre Dame back in 2009, and Mike Leach was there at the Alamo Bowl with Texas Tech, his third Alamo Bowl, taking Texas Tech, back in 2001 and 2009. What's interesting is Leach was there in 2009, and so was the Cougs when we played Notre Dame. So that was same year in a non-con. But this is Leach's third Alamo Bowl game, 2001, 2009, and 2018. And he's led, Washington State to 5 bowl games. And that ties with Mike Price. So he is tied with Price on bowl games. Washington State's 10 wins. We've got a record going, the 6th 10-win season in program history since 2003, and we've got the best, the nation's best passing attack, and number 30th ranked defense in the country. And of course, we got Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year, Gardner Minshew. He also won the 2018 Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award. That's the nation's best quarterback. How fun was that to watch him win that award? That's a big deal. He had a great time with back east with Leach and everything. Mike Leach also got the 2018 Pac-12 Coach of the Year Award, which is just incredible. Speaking about coaches, Jim Walden, of course, he's got a few things in common, being, head coach of the Cougs and of the Cyclones. And he's actually going to be watching the game on TV, not making the trip. Jim is retired. He's 80 years old. And, he does regret not having a lot of success at either school. He really was not successful at Washington State or Iowa State. In fact, he had a lot of losing seasons. But there is one thing we're going to give Coach Walden credit for, and that was bringing the Apple Cup down from Joe Albee Stadium in Spokane to Pullman for the very first time, and that was 81. Which was just amazing. 81-82. Amazing that he did that, because we're never looking back, right? We're never going back to Spokane Joe Albee ever again. And of course, so that, you get a little credit there, but he is retired. And you got limited income when you are in your retirement years, so he's not going to be at the game. But he says, "Hey, my favorite team. He's going to win." And he's got Wyoming in a bowl game. and he's got Washington State and Iowa State. One of those teams are going to win, so he's a winner, right? So speaking about Iowa State, they've sold out literally, 12,000. They're just jacked up, man. All the fans, 12,000 tickets in less than 3 days. They sold all out. They asked for more tickets. Apparently they got more tickets. They sold out of those. And, Alamo Bowl is the top selling bowl game outside the New Year's Six Bowls. So 51%, this is interesting, 51, and it's hard to get to for us. A lot of money. If you do the math, it's about $5K. If you're going there with T-shirts, tickets, just everything, hotel, airfare. I mean, it's just a real difficult place because if you're flying into San Antonio, it's expensive, or you can go Houston or Dallas and it's a 4-hour drive. So it's a lot of money. Rose Bowl, obviously priority, but Cougs just haven't stepped up. We bought a lot of tickets, but a lot of them were corner end zone. Seat locations weren't very good. You could do sometimes better on third-party vendors. But maybe donate your tickets if you're not going to the military, which would be great. And a lot of people did that, but we have not sold a lot of tickets. So, Iowa State just has crazy planes, trains, and automobiles. They are showing up. It's going to be more Cyclones at the stadium than it is the Cougs, apparently. And check this out. 51% of the ticket sales have come from Iowa residents, and only 4% have come from the state of Washington. So, only 4% from the state of Washington, and Iowa's got 51%. That's crazy. Do the math, right? And $5,000 is a lot of money if your priorities are other places. So, if it's Rose Bowl, that's a whole different ball game, but it's not. And like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, Coug flights were canceled. Some of the flights to SeaTac were canceled due to electrical thunderstorms. Of course, we have nothing to worry about. The Alamo Dome being inside. But it's some of those flights were canceled or postponed. I just hope that some of those Coug fans get down there or they get their money back or whatnot. So anyway, it's going to be a fun time. And during this holiday season, New Year's Day is right around the corner. It's going to be great, and we're going to have a great time. The Alamo Bowl, this is just going to be fun. Let's show up. Let's win this game. 11 games this season. Let's do it. Hey, that's about it for this episode of the Podcast Coug. Enjoy the Alamo Bowl. Happy New Year, and happy New Year, everybody, and go Cougs.
We run on action, on power, on heavy hits. From kickoff to the final whistle, we thrive on the tension, the anticipation, the intensity that electrifies every second of the game. The Valero Alamo Bowl. We run on football.
You've been listening to the Podcast Coug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug On Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. This has been a presentation of the Podcast Coug Radio Network. Find us at PodcastCoug.com.
N-G-T